Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Body Keeps the Score, Brain, Mind, and Body, and the Healing of Trauma. This is study number 12. And wow, this section was very, very tough, to say the least. I throughout this tags, we are getting insight into a number of behaviors that occur under the system of white supremacy that just indicate a reality that white supremacists, suspected racists, white people do not care about children. We're gonna talk in no particular order. We could discuss this portion of text, but just we hear just a number of examples. It was Kathy, Maggie, and Annie. These are just the ones from this text, from this portion. Earlier in the text, we learn about more women, I suspect white females, who were just victims of incest. And this text has shown me just how popular, no, not how popular, but just how common incest is, and I suspect white fathers, sexually assaulting their daughters. Kathy was sold into child prostitution by her father, and also gang raped by her father and some friends, and they used Budweiser bottles to sexually assault her. So it's just very. This is a very common behavior under the system, and we should want these behaviors and to end forever. And the only way that's going to happen is if the system of white supremacy is replaced with a system of justice. Other than that, this is I suspect going to keep happening, and I can only imagine how it has intensified, because the trauma is so real. But this book definitely is about healing from this sort of stuff. So we learn about EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a technique that we're gonna discuss a little bit more, but I think it's a pretty constructive technique because it allows people to recall memories without having to, you know, talk to anyone or share those memories with people. So that's very constructive, a very constructive way that a person can get some therapy. Uh, but learning about this, just a question came into mind: is how many non-white people know about EMDR? Like, how many non-white people have been like given access to this sort of therapy and other therapies outside of medication? Because there's a whole study that discusses just many benefits to EMDR, um, but it seems that non-white people only are given medications and very, very rarely given access to these sorts of treatments. But are there others who would like to comment?
Yeah, um, that was the exact question I had myself. '05 was, I wrote it down, do non-white populations have access to this kind of technique or this treatment? And you brought up a good point. Most times non-white people are given medication to deal with any kind of traumatic or psychiatric issues that they may be dealing with. And this EMDR, this is the first time I've ever heard of it. So I was just sitting here listening to it, and I just thought, man, it sounds like the holy grail of treatments. How can I get my hands on that? What it is? I want to know what it is and how it works. So I looked it up, and EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And it says it is a psychotherapy treatment that was originally designed to alleviate the distress associated with traumatic memories. I'm going to skip through some of this because one thing he didn't do really in the text was kind of explain what it was, or thoroughly, at least in my opinion. From what it sounded like was you just kind of like wave your finger, and the patient follows your finger with their eyes, and then just begin the treatment that way. But it says during EMDR therapy, the client attends to emotionally disturbing material, in brief sequential doses, while simultaneously focusing on an external stimulus. Therapist-directed lateral eye movements are the most commonly used external stimulus. A variety of other stimuli, including hand tapping and audio simulation, are often used. So it seems like this first came out in like the 90s, or like 2001. That's what I'm seeing. But I really wanted to know if non-white people knew about this, because I don't think I've never heard of this being talked about before. Even all the kind of like the mental illness and the treatments that everyone talks about, this is never really mentioned. People talk about going to therapy and whatnot, but this seems to be very effective. I also wrote down, I think it would be nice to talk to a psychiatrist who maybe knows about racism and maybe knows something about this technique, or just a psychiatrist in general, because I would like to know if, this seems to be very useful when dealing with trauma, whether you can kind of use this for non-white people to associate their trauma with racism and to start dealing with it. And one thing he used often when he was talking about it, and specifically EMDR, was how it changed traumatic events. And he used this once, but he also made note, like said stuff about this, something similar. But he said EMDR changes traumatic events to things of the past. So imagine experiencing something as horrible as rape, as being raped as a child, and then it almost being like, oh, that's in the past. I moved on from that. I don't really experience those things anymore. I don't even really think about it anymore. Like, that rape. I don't think about that anymore. Even the guy, he had the other story. I forgot the guy's name, but the guy that was stabbed with a beer bottle. For 30 years, he was a miserable human being. And due to this treatment, he no longer thinks about that. He enjoys his life now. And, I'm just thinking, like, wow, what would happen if non-white people, especially Black people, had access to this kind of treatment in droves? Like, let's figure out if we can just train, like, do you even need a psychiatry degree or anything? Like, come on, let's just train each other and start helping each other deal with this kind of stuff. This seems like the holy grail of treatments. I could be wrong. That's it for me for now.
Yeah, I wanted to answer the question, both of you guys' questions. The answer is no. Many non-white people do not have access to this information because of the system of racism and supremacy that hides this knowledge and programs non-white people, primarily Black people, to engage in activities that are not constructive, such as clowning around, fussing about, twerking, those sorts of things. So oh yeah, making TikTok videos these days. So yeah, I was flabbergasted when I heard that you could heal from trauma without talking about it, because I don't want to talk about all the stuff that I've experienced. I don't want to mention it to anybody. So like, because I'm a victim of racism, white supremacy, I'd much rather, I'll die with a stone cold heart versus talking about what I've experienced. So to me, it's more easier to do. But now that I'm aware of EMDR, I'm like, I can just sort it out quite. I can sort it out in a session of therapy. It seems like so. I think this type of treatment needs to be accessible to all non-white Black people. Black people should be prioritized to receive this, because I suspect that 99% of the Black world's population is, highly traumatized and has PTSD. And this chapter also, focused on another issue that manifests within the system of racism and white supremacy, and that is incest, rape, and rape in general. Like I lost count on how many people I heard get raped. I know it was 3 females and I think two guys who were raped by their dads. And let's believe that the parents who were raping were probably raped by their parents, and the ones who were raping their parents were probably raped by their grandparents, and so on and so forth. So to rape a child, to rape your own child, that the ramifications for that has to be the person themselves is the victim of incest and rape. To me, that's the only logical explanation, unless we are like, examining racism, white supremacy, and just saying it's in their nature, it's what they do, they rape each other, they kill each other. So to me, it's 2 different sides. Some of these are victims raping their family members, and some of them are just products of racism, white supremacy. That raping activity is a symbol, of like, gathering more power, gathering more control, gathering more masculinity, and we are quite aware that, racist man, racist woman are very insecure, but also narcissistic. So these type of things can happen. Yeah. That's it for now.
Yeah. Well said, sir. Well said, Kwaku. Yeah, it is really interesting that and David's story, and honestly everyone's story, Maggie's, David's, Kathy's, and and I don't know if I said Annie already, but all of these people like were victims of like horrendous mishappenings, and they got access to this EMDR, and like David for 30 years he was still having flashbacks, still having many symptoms from his being attacked by a group of teenagers who took out one of his eyes with a broken bottle, and so he resented his own kids, his own son, because they reminded him of the attackers, and that's just like the how deep trauma can just confuse a person, and have them taking out all their anger, animosity towards their children, and not coming up with constructive ways to deal with it. But David eventually managed to become more correct thinking, or he got access to this therapy, and he like drop of a hat, he was very he recovered. He was able to like have a constructive relationship with his wife, and him and his son were able to grow closer together. He started to laugh more. He just started to thrive, and because he's a white person, he's actually able to so-called live, because the system is for a racist man and racist woman who can only be white. So he's able to thrive, after getting this access. So I'm like, this treatment, whether it's 100% effective or not, seems to be very, very, very constructive. And non-white people are trained to not talk about racism and white supremacy, trained to not talk about their problems in a constructive manner, or and just trained not to talk about their true feelings. So now they don't have to talk about it. They just have to do this little treatment right here called EMDR, and then they could perhaps get some constructive insight on how to better their predicament, which would be logically, uh, which would be to counter racism and white supremacy by changing one's thought, speech, and behavior, and that can do a tremendous amount to one's well-being, and becoming a healthier person. Because if you're countering racism or supremacy, then you really shouldn't be ingesting a lot of poison that they have convinced the masses that are food, like fast food, McDonald's. You should really attempt to put more nutrient-rich food in your body. You should attempt to draw more on real life problems and solutions like racism and white supremacy. You should probably journal more, write more, attempt to produce counter-racist material, and not focus so much on area 3, entertainment. So this therapy, this treatment could help a group of people who already have been trained not to talk about the problem, because they don't have to talk about the problem. They can just get some insight on how to better themselves. And I'm sure this treatment would present to them racism and white supremacy, and like was mentioned last week, that being like the thing that needs every non-white person, especially Black people's urgent attention, racism and white supremacy. So yeah, and it's just, oh yeah, just a second to what Serge said. Yeah, the theme, like incest rape, is very common in the system of white supremacy. White people, I suspect, do not place that much value in their children, not that much at least, because it's very common that we're learning that it's very common that this happens quite a while, and due to white supremacy, I suspect many of these people that we're learning about, like in this text, are white, because white people have access to this sort of treatment. So a lot of white families, so-called white families, practicing incest is that a white behavior? Should we end the system of white supremacy so that behavior ends? Yes, of course, we should.
Very well said. What you and Quakey had said earlier, 526, it reminded me of just the abundant of benefits that come when the individual seeks therapy. For example, the gentleman, forgot his name, but he, I believe he was attacked, and he started mistreating his son, his teenage son, and he became distant with his wife. And after participating in EDMR therapy, the relationship with his wife bettered, and they were even able to engage in couples yoga, where they would meditate and heal together, so to speak. And while also the relationship with his son increased. And I just think of the many non-white people who are just, they never get an opportunity to address their trauma, or for the most part heal their trauma, so they're kind of just stuck in these cycles of negative relationships, negative perceptions of self, perceptions of others. So this is just kind of reminding me that we all need to address our trauma, and get rid of as much as possible, so we can live the most constructive life, official lives, basically, like life heavy, where we're able to engage in counter war, basically. So we could help remove this system of racism, white supremacy, so other people don't have to be mistreated.
Yeah, I wanted to add. So one of you guys had mentioned that, I think it was Sir, but he goes on to mention something along the lines of the EMDR allows patients to examine their past without experiencing trauma. And so I was kind of thinking about Dr. Frances Cress Welsing and whether she knew about something like this. But then again, it made me think, Black people, non-white people, but Black people especially, like they're gonna have to be in a certain place to kind of seek out that kind of treatment. I don't think Black people are able to. I think first and foremost, you have to admit that you're experiencing some kind of trauma and try to figure out what the source of that trauma is. And if you don't understand that racism is at the source of a lot of the trauma that you experience, it begs to the question of, will this actually be somewhat effective? So that's something I was thinking about, but also the fact that this treatment allows them to like work through their trauma without re-experiencing it. I thought that was very interesting. It seems very like a very powerful thing to do, to be able to use. And he also mentioned that I don't know if it's the treatment or like the effects of the treatment or like once you're cured, but he says that it encourages commitment and accountability for your body. So meaning, taking responsibility for treatment, responsibility for, yourself. And, that to me sounds like just practicing self-respect. I think that that's a big issue that non-white people, especially Black people, have, is not practicing enough self-respect for themselves, engaging in a lot of activities that are not constructive or even close to helping them with their problem. I mean, he goes on to mention that like the effects of numbing, people start to indulge in drugs and alcohol, and there's some other things that you mentioned, but how that kind of leads to a false sense of self-control. So rather than looking at the issue, taking for lack of a better word, responsibility, or however you have it, and actually trying to deal with it in a constructive manner, more often than not, people resort to things like alcohol, drugs. I think he even mentioned people seeking like a high sense of maybe like an adrenaline rush, so like gambling, prostitution, etc., to kind of deal with those problems. So I think that once again, this treatment sounds like a good, useful tool that this suspected racist has given us. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it there for now.
Yeah, it says here that at least half of all traumatized people try to dull their intolerable inner world with drugs or alcohol. The flip side of numbing is sensation seeking. Many people cut themselves and make the numbing go away, while others try bungee jumping or high risk activities like prostitution and gambling. Any of these methods can give them a false and paradoxical feeling of control. When people are chronically angry or scared, constant muscle tension ultimately leads to spasms, back pains, migraine, headaches, fibromyalgia, and other forms of chronic pain. And this is very, very, very true. This is like I think a lot of that extreme insanity that we have been forced to contend with due to the system of white supremacy. We just develop a bunch of words and labels to deal with symptoms of the problem and not the true problem, which is racism, white supremacy, and of course, non-white people, particularly Black and brown people, in this case, are heavily involved with alcohol, drugs and alcohol, I suspect, which is why which is why the problem is still happening. It's because there's not enough, there's not an effective number of non-white people who are attempting to be constructive, because we're all just so traumatized and so victimized that we are just numbing out, self-numbing. We are so distracted with distract distracting ourselves from the trauma of racism and white supremacy, rather than countering it. And it's really interesting that the addicting to working out bit is in here, because it's just like there's so many different victims of racism come to mind when thinking when going over this part about the numbing. Um, well, I thought it was pretty constructive. EDMR, I think I time coded this some constructive information to share about it, and also that study involving EDMR, very telling on how constructive this is compared to other treatments, especially medication.
Association lost his unit at the Institute of the Pennsylvania Hospital. It might have all been a coincidence, but it felt as if my whole world was under attack. My distress about the trauma clinic seemed like a good test for my EMDR trial. While I was following my partner's fingers with my eyes, a rapid succession of fuzzy childhood scenes came to mind. Intense family dinner table conversations, confrontations with schoolmates during recess, throwing pebbles at a shed window with my older brother. All of them, the sort of vivid, floating hypnopompic images we experience when we slumber late on a Sunday morning, then forget the moment we fully awaken. After about half an hour, my fellow trainee and I revisited the scene in which my boss told me that he was closing my clinic. Now I felt resigned. Okay, it happened, and now it's time to move on. I never looked back. The clinic later reconstituted itself and has thrived ever since.
All right, I think this part is really interesting because he mentions the bit about like the images were like something like dreamlike, and later in the the portions covered, we they introduced the sleep connection, how important sleep is, and how EDMR is very similar to REM, like I think rapid eye movement during sleep, which is when you have more REM sleep, you have less depression, versus when you have less EDMR. And victims of racism have a really, really hard time getting an adequate number of hours and REM sleep. And I know this is true because sometimes I am also a victim of this reality. Um, but yeah, all the clubbing and going out and wanting to do late night adventuring non-white victims love to do. This is why we shouldn't do that, because we need sleep. Actually, I think let's see.
Yeah, I wanted to quickly talk about the self-harming that manifests within trauma survivors, and that could be people who survive incest rape or rape from a stranger or being stabbed. Um, and I think it was really interesting that the woman there's a woman in the segment who was mutilating her breast, and I think her choosing to mutilate her breast is quite symbolic because maybe she she adds the reason why she was sexually assaulted and raped was because she has um, breasts that are like sexualized and racist white supremacist society. That was it. That was it.
Wow, that is a great decoding of behaviors under the system, because I didn't even put that together, but yeah, everything definitely has a reason, and I suspect that is you're definitely on the money right there. So he says here that increasing our time in REM sleep reduces depression, while the less REM sleep we get, the more likely we are to become depressed. Of course, PTSD is notoriously associated with disturbed sleep, and self-medication with alcohol or drugs further disrupts REM sleep. So yeah, non-white victims of racism are not getting REM sleep, I suspect, and I may be incorrect, but yeah, this text definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to add to the REM sleep. So you have, I want to say 3 to 4 stages, depending on if you want to add some. But you have like the awake state where you're kind of still awake, you haven't really gone to sleep. Then you have light sleep, which you can kind of wake up at any time. Then you go into your REM sleep stage, and this is where most of your dreams happen, rapid eye movement. So you can tell when somebody's in their REM stage. You just look at them, and their eyes are kind of like moving back and forth while their eyelids are closed. And you have your deep sleep state. So the last two, this is where most of your recovery happens for people who may exercise or do other kinds of activities. But this is kind of like the moment where you digest, where you recover. And specifically when talking about exercising, this is where your body is repairing itself and recovering from the day. So you can kind of use that for not only exercise but just day-to-day activities. This is the moment to digest and to go through replay the day. So when he was talking about some of the increase in REM sleep. Sorry. Oh yeah, an increase in REM sleep decreases depression. He also mentioned alcohol, drugs, etc. disturb REM sleep. And he mentioned that the veterans who were waking up at night, it was because during REM sleep is because they were having dreams and they were experiencing something traumatic. Nowadays, most people, non-white people, don't actually get to enter REM sleep because I suspect because of the high levels of alcohol, drugs, etc. that they consume. Most people nowadays aren't even able to have a decent night's sleep for various reasons. And what is kind of surprising to me is they can't really pinpoint on what it is, why I can't have a good night's sleep. For me, I don't know. I've always been kind of able to sleep through the night. Find it. But so I thought that I just know that sleep in general is very important for people to get somewhere between 6 to 8 hours of sleep. Eight isn't the absolute maximum, but you want to hit that sweet spot, like 7 hours of sleep. But I understand that sleep is very important for people in general.
Okay, thank you for that. Quickly, would it be possible for you to eliminate some of that background noise you have going on when you're speaking? I did hear the majority of what you said, but it was quite difficult.
Yeah, I'll do that.
So So yeah, and also I think I have a time coded here on just and EDMR is constructive because not only it helps the person deal with trauma, but it seems to like promote like this source of like increases like I wrote down mind power because all the patients who are getting it are able to describe their trauma in ways that they've never have been able to before ever, and it seems like very profound that they're able to you know through this treatment get access to under being able to process their experiences much better. And I think I have it somewhere over here, this area. Let's see.
Her family, and her work as an assistant professor of child development. I'd like to share my notes on Kathy's fourth EMDR treatment, not only to demonstrate what typically happens in such a session, but also to reveal the human mind in action as it integrates a traumatic experience. No brain scan, blood test, or rating scale can measure this, and even a video recording can convey only a shadow of how EMDR can unleash the imaginative powers of the mind. Kathy sat with her chair at a 45-degree angle to mine, so that we were about 4 feet apart. I asked her to bring a particularly painful memory to mind, and encouraged her to recall what she had heard, saw, thought, and felt in her body as it took place. My records don't show whether she told me what the particular memory was. My guess is probably not, since I did not write it down. I asked her whether she was now in the memory, and when she said yes, I asked her how it felt on a scale of 1 to 10. About a 9, she said. Then I asked her to follow my moving finger with her eyes. From time to time, after completing a set of about 25 eye movements, I might say, "Take a deep breath," followed by, "What do you get now?" or "What comes to mind now?" Kathy would then tell me what she was thinking. Whenever her tone of voice, facial expression, body movements, or breathing patterns indicated that this was an emotionally significant theme, I would say, "Notice that," and start another set of eye movements, during which she did not speak. Other than uttering those few words, I remained silent for the next 45 minutes. Here's the association Kathy reported after the first eye movement sequence. "I realize that I have scars from when he tied my hands behind my back. The other scar is when he marked me to claim me as his. And there," she then points, "are bite marks." She looked stunned but surprisingly calm as she recalled, "I remember being doused in gasoline. He took Polaroid pictures of me, and then I was submerged in water. I was gang raped by my father and 2 of his friends. I was tied to a table. I remember them raping me with Budweiser bottles." My stomach was clenching, but I didn't comment beyond asking Kathy to keep those memories in mind. After about 30 more back and forth movements, I stopped when I saw she was smiling. When I asked what she was thinking, she said, "I was in a karate class. It was great. I really kicked butt. I saw them backing off. I yelled, 'Don't you see you are hurting me? I am not your girlfriend.' I said, 'Stay there,' and began the next sequence. When it ended, Kathy said, 'I have an image of 2 me's, this smart, pretty little girl, and that little slut. All these women who could not take care of themselves.'"
All right, I'm gonna pause it here briefly. I think this is a great example of how trauma just really distorts the mind and produces really incorrect thinking and really grotesque thinking. Because keep in mind, she's calling her victim child self a little slut and placing the blame on the on her child self who was raped by her father and put into prostitution. But this is just perhaps the training, the messages and the programming that is global on the planet. Perhaps victims of abuse, victims of mistreatment are trained to blame themselves because um, the system is just so against giving constructive help to non-white people, and non-white people experience like the most mistreatment and the most atrocities and harm 24/7, that we have been just trained to blame ourselves for our victimization. And so I think that her like this, her saying that is really telling. But I'm gonna continue it.
Or me or their men, leaving it up to me to service all these men. She started to sob during the next sequence, and when we stopped, she said, I saw how little I was. The brutalization of the little girl. It was not my fault. I nodded and said, That's right, stay there. The next round ended with Kathy reporting, I'm picturing my life now, my big me holding my little me, saying, You are safe now. I nodded encouragingly and continued. The images kept coming. I have pictures of a bulldozer flattening the house I grew up in. It's over. Then Kathy started on a different track. I am thinking about how much I like Jeffrey, a boy in one of her classes. Thinking that he might not want to hang out with me. Thinking I can't handle it. I have never been someone's girlfriend before, and I don't know how. I asked her what she thought she needed to know, and began the next sequence. Now there is a person who just wants to be with me. It is too simple. I don't know how to just be myself around men. I am petrified. As she tracked my finger, Kathy started to sob. When I stopped, she told me, I had an image of Jeffrey and me sitting in the coffee house. My father comes in the door. He starts screaming at the top of his lungs, and he's wielding an axe. He says, I told you that you belong to me. He puts me on top of the table. Then he rapes me. And then he rapes Jeffrey. She was crying hard now. How can you be open with somebody when you have visions of your dad raping you, and then raping us both? I wanted to comfort her, but I knew it was more important to keep her associations moving. I asked her to focus on what she felt in her body. I feel it in my forearms, in my shoulders, and my right chest. I just want to be held. We continued the EMDR, and when we stopped, Kathy looked relaxed. I heard Jeffrey say, it's okay, that he was sent here to take care of me, and that it was not anything that I did, and that he just wants to be with me for my sake. Again, I asked what she felt in her body. I feel really peaceful, a little bit shaky, like when you're using new muscles. Some relief. Jeffrey knows all this already. I feel like I'm alive, and that it's all over. But I am afraid that my father has another little girl, and that makes me very, very sad. I want to save her. But as we continued, the trauma returned, together with other thoughts and images. I need to throw up. I have intrusions of lots of smells. Bad cologne, alcohol, vomit. A few minutes later, Kathy was crying profusely. I really feel my mom here now. It feels like she wants me to forgive her. I have the sense that the same thing happened to her. She's apologizing to me over and over. She's telling me that this happened to her, that it was my grandfather. She's also telling me that my grandfather is really sorry for not being there to protect me. I kept asking her to take deep breaths and stay with whatever was coming up. At the end of the next sequence, Kathy said, I feel like it's over. I felt my grandmother holding me at my current age, telling me that she is so sorry she married my grandfather, that she and my mom are making sure that it stops here. After one final EMDR sequence, Kathy was smiling. I have an image of pushing my father out of the coffee house and Jeffrey locking the door behind him. He stands outside. You can see him through the glass. Everybody's making fun of him. With the help of EMDR, Kathy was able to integrate the memories of her trauma and call on her imagination to help her lay them to rest, arriving at a sense of completion and control. She did so with minimal input from me and without any discussion of the particulars of her experiences. I never felt a reason to question their accuracy. Her experiences were real to her, and my job was to help her deal with them in the present. The process freed something in her mind, brain, to activate new images, feelings, and thoughts. It was as if her life force emerged to create new possibilities for her future. As we've seen, traumatic memories...
All right, that's it right there. Produce new life force. I just thought this is really telling on how constructive this could be, you know, because victims of racism now, especially Black people, our imagination has been deadened, has been severely sabotaged, retarded, to say the least. So we lack imagination. We lack the vision of living in a system of justice. You know, living in a system where we are not at the bottom, where we are not constantly mistreated in the form of being killed, form of being name called, in the form of just being made like the world's livestock and laughing stock at the same time. Um, so this is very very constructive treatment that when I began practicing therapy, I definitely will implement for sure. One of the final, like, you know, many counter-racist scientists have said we should learn something about everything, and I'm definitely learning a lot from this text. This heart rate variability, never heard of this, and this text is another example of how white people have a very clear understanding on how like the body works, how the mind works, how the brain works. If they really wanted to solve these problems, they could. But the business of white supremacy, you know, these problems support the basis of white supremacy, which is why they will never be solved under the system. The system of justice will solve all problems and guarantee balance between people, guarantee peace on planet Earth by guaranteeing no one is mistreated and those who need help receive constructive help. And right now, 2021, the people who need help the most are Black people, especially Black people, and everyone classified as not white. But yeah, it says here that but when we're at our best, these two systems work closely together to keep us in an optimal state of engagement with our environment and with ourselves. And these two systems, I guess, are the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. And these are concepts that I know very little about. I'm just learning about them through this text. And heart rate variability, I would suggest, you know, victims looking into these terms and these concepts, because I most certainly will was fascinated by learning that you know, these systems. I think it was the parasympathetic nervous system is helps our body with healing wounds. I thought that was interesting, and I'm going to implement that into some of my counter-racist writing materials. But yeah, very interesting text. Was there anything else folks have wanted to share?
Yeah, I wanted to in the segment you just played, the white female who was raped by her dad and his friends. She said that she felt sad because she felt that her father had another little girl, meaning another victim, and I think that shows that the cycles of rape just continue on. Like these people who rape their children, once their children are no longer of age, they kind of just find some other little girl and pimp her out. And it's just really unfortunate that these things are allowed to happen under the system of racism and supremacy, where like children, even white children, are getting are falling victim to atrocities because of the system that they created and they sustain and they help maintain, called racism and supremacy. So she's aware that it's going to happen to another little girl.
Well said, Mrs. Said. Even even white sacrifices, even white children. Yeah, but it's been stated, white people do not care about children. So should we get into closing comments? Would anyone like to get us started?
Yeah, I'm not getting started. Yeah, therapy can definitely improve one's productivity and efficiency and doing things that are, in the context of countering white supremacy or attempting to counter it. And I guess it's glad I participated in this particular session because EDMR is such an interesting therapy technique, and I think a lot of non-white people, especially Black people, can benefit from it. And, hopefully, when you have individuals like 0526 working in the area of like being a therapist, we'll be able to have that access, and community people will be able to have access to some authentic healing versus continuing to live in cycles of suffering and continuing to produce offspring who will be replicants of their parents. And also like rape is it comes with white supremacy. So the white people who listen to this, your white power and your white domination, has tremendous, like, horrifying ramifications. If you would help us replace racism, white supremacy with justice, it would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, thank you for my closing comments. As we continue to read this book, I think it continues to reinforce that drinking, drugs are not healthy ways of coping with trauma or dealing with trauma. Not even coping, but just dealing with it, addressing it.
Okay.
I think that, can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
I think that moving forward, Black people, non-white people, we really need to start to produce more constructive ways of addressing our traumas. Start figuring out ways to really deal with the problem of racism, white supremacy. I think that this book has been constructive and very useful in providing some tools and strategies and techniques to use. I don't know how many more times, Black people, non-white people need to be told that drinking, gambling, etc., are not useful are more constructive ways of dealing with trauma. So thank you for this discussion. This is a constructive use of my time. Greatly appreciate you both.
Thank you, sir. Well said. And yeah, I think honestly, EMDR, given the last clip I played, it can be done with people who are not even like trained. You know, just play that clip, repeat the lines that were said by the therapist, and I think that could be a really constructive exercise for victims to try it on one another, or just to try in general, because it's a very useful tool, I suspect, in memory recalling and attaching memories to with a context, because that what was also mentioned. A pattern I kept saying is that this tactics EDMR gave people an understanding of their trauma within a new context, and that's what the global majority of non-white people, especially Black people, need to understand, is that all of their problems or all of their trauma is due to racism, white supremacy. That is what they have failed to place their suffering and mistreatment and misery in the context of. They failed to place it in the context of white supremacy, racism, the incorrect system, the unjust system, the powers that be, whatever you want to call it. White people have done a tremendous number on our thought, speech, and behavior, and it's the only way that we can make sense of why Black people call each other niggas while driving around shooting each other and killing each other, producing more trauma for Black existence. So yeah, this really constructive text. Only 5 more weeks and we will be done with it. And hopefully, still, I know there's still lots to learn. But yeah, learn something about everything. And I'm gonna adjourn it there.